I've made a choice to be very out in my life. Every workplace that I consult in, everything I do, I make it 100% clear that I'm a gay man. I feel like I've had to rebalance my life because I spent the first 40 plus years of my life not out. Initially it was to make sure that I could never go back, so I burnt all my bridges because I was afraid of going back to the safety. But now there's no chance of that. I've made the shift and I just do it more for a political reason, to make sure that people understand that you can be out and proud. You know, I was strongly socialised into the idea that your whole journey in life is to marry and raise a family, and that's how you get meaning in life. It's all about making a contribution to the world, e.g. social work or social change or teaching or whatever, and raising your own family. And I didn't have an idea of myself outside that construction. I was sort of falling in love with best friends and things like that pretty regularly, and that made me realise I wasn't the average. I didn't know any openly queer people anywhere in any of my circles. Coming from a very staunch Irish Catholic background, the word wasn't even mentioned, or there were no role models, there were no nothing. There was no way of identifying what that meant. There's a sort of authenticity question that I commonly get asked, right, which is how could you be gay and how could you be married? I met the mother of my children overseas. We travelled around the world together, fell in love, had an awesome time. And I thought here was a woman who loved me and I'd always wanted to have children. We actually talked about it. We negotiated some time out after being together for a couple of years. I went and experimented. I went to the Laird Hotel, and we're talking 30 years ago, and I went to Pokies, which was the Prince of Wales. It was beyond my ability to actually identify with anything that I saw there. Yeah, you know, it was so strange. And I thought, well, if that's queer, that's not me. And I had, on the one hand, and then I had this wonderful woman who was in love with me and wanted to have my children. So we got a lot of counselling and everything and just thought, fuck it, we're going to do it anyway. Got married. And for many of those 16 years, very successfully and happily. We used to live opposite the showgrounds, and they had a specials bin. And every year I used to go to the showgrounds and get cheap books. And in the specials bin was this amazing book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And as part of that process, you write in a journal. And I had written about someone basically at my work situation that I was infatuated with. The mother of my children read that, and as a result, the marriage started to come apart. So that was the day before Christmas, and we were separated by Easter. The big hardest thing was the idea that I wasn't going to have 24/7 contact with my children. It was the most difficult decision I've ever made in my life. And the common wisdom, and it was true, the boys find it harder than the girls generally, because particularly if they're adolescent boys, they're dealing with their own sexuality. So my youngest was in denial. He was thinking binary at that stage. He was only, I don't know, 8 or something. My oldest one had actually called me a faggot a few weeks before I came out. It was clearly he was reading things that even I couldn't acknowledge. And then my daughter has been very supportive and is heavily involved in the campaign for marriage equality, and now I get heaps of support from the kids. The best thing I've ever done in my life is have kids, like without any doubt. And also the hardest thing. So I don't regret it in any way, shape or form. But it does leave you in a particularly challenging situation. I'd go to the school to pick up the kids and all the parents would shun me, like they would not talk to me, like I'd broken the rules. Luckily I had friends who supported me, former work colleagues and others who I had got more support from work actually than I did. My family were too freaked out. You know, now I'm impatient when there are a lot of gay men who I meet on the internet who aren't out and who want to have a relationship, and I just say no, I'm not interested. It's unbelievable how many gay men are still not out, and particularly in, I think, areas like the north and west of Melbourne. I think that intersection between religion, culture and queer is a particularly difficult space, and again that's one of the reasons why most of my art is about that space, where I'm reclaiming a spiritual component and as a queer man. That was taken away from me because I was brought up in a binary situation where I was told you can't be Catholic and gay. It has a lot of sin and guilt attached to being queer, which is really destructive. And it also makes it hard for your families to accept you. My late father was quite supportive in his own way, but my mother has been very embarrassed. She was ashamed. She's been ashamed of me. I was told by my family that, you know, we'll support you under all circumstances, and that's the nature of parents to do that. But it's actually been not my experience. My experience has been that families contain people, some of whom are just as judgmental as the rest of the population. And I used to think that, in a way, you had to take your family with you if you came out. And now I think, well, fuck them, do it anyway. If you're waiting for your family's approval to come out, you'll never come out. And I'm just as much a part of my queer family as I am of my family of origin. I see as much or more of them. We support each other through sickness and health. In order to get critical mass, we have to form alliances across our own gender interests. And I think there is a natural affinity, because if you've experienced discrimination, you're more likely to bond with someone else who has. And I think right across the letters of the GLBTIQ spectrum, we're facing some similar issues. And I also think that intersex, bi, transgender issues are becoming more and more important. And in a way, there's been a second wave of coming out that's happening. The sort of age is dropping like massively when people come out. So I think that's what's changing. So there'll be people who've never been in the closet, you know, living in the West now. I am concerned about the number of my male queer friends who've become HIV positive in the last several years. We've had years of oppression as a queer culture, and we've been very supportive of each other through that period of time. But one of the downsides is because we've been so busy fighting homophobia that there hasn't been a strong self-reflective vein in gay culture. Gay men need to become more self-reflective about sexual behaviour and the damage it can cause to themselves and others. In the past, that was seen as, you know, colluding with homophobia to have those discussions, but it's time we did. I think there's a broader issue though of queer mental health. I have a lot of queer friends who don't enjoy good mental health. I mean, I've developed some mental health techniques about what keeps me functioning, and I'd like to see a lot more emphasis put on how we can do that for each other. My daughter has gone on the record as saying that she wants her father to have the same right to remarriage as her mother. And from a civil rights point of view, it's incredibly important. But in some ways it misses the point, which is that I think queer people have other things to offer. I don't want that to be lost in the fight to be the same, because frankly, I don't want to be the same. I want to have equality, but I don't want sameness. I spoke to a young man about working in a transport company and the amount of harassment that he works in the West, and the amount of harassment day after day that he gets in his workplace. So I'd like to see the Equal Opportunity Commission knocking on the doors of the companies in the West and offering training. And I'd like to see some leaderships by some of the big players in being more queer friendly. The challenge for the West to really embrace queer people, it'll be the making of the West. That will be when the West is truly a place for everybody.